Now that the report by the Commission of Inquiry into the Public Investment Corporation, or PIC, has been released, it is up to the National Prosecuting Authority to take further action against those implicated. President Cyril Ramaphosa publicized the document yesterday, which details how senior executives abused their power and that the board failed to do its job. The commission was appointed in October 2018 to investigate allegations of irregularities in investments by the asset management organization. Key witnesses took to the stand, giving testimony over a period of close on a year. The corporation manages over 2 trillion rand in state assets, and its biggest client is the government employee pension fund. Dewald van Rensburg, a journalist from AmaBhungane Centre for Investigative Journalism, wrote extensively on the PIC. He's with us in studio to discuss this further. Good to have you. Welcome.
Good to be here.
I know you said you're rather bleary-eyed this morning, just having to sit and read the 1,000-page report that's come out. But talk to me about it. Any surprises for you, who's been working on this for so long?
Well, I mean, insofar as it deals with transactions, these are largely transactions we have written about, and our overwhelming feeling is vindication, because a lot of what we have done is affirmed and corroborated by the report. There's that, and also just it goes further than we thought. It's this endless barrage of findings about misgovernance at the PIC, which isn't necessarily restricted to making bad investment decisions. It's just how the place was run also.
Okay, let's dig a little bit deeper into it. And you know, it's difficult to summarize the report because there is so much that's come out of it. But let's perhaps try and essentially have a look at the corruption and the irregularities in the corporation and the kind of picture that's been painted coming out of this report. I mean, how comprehensive were the different levels of corruption at the PIC?
Well, it spans a very wide spectrum. So the things they dealt with went down to minutiae of governance, things like the IT system doesn't work even, straight up to people who, get deals for friends or completely subvert the processes by having secret meetings after which billion-rand deals are done. So it's a wide spectrum. It's not all crime. A lot of it's just bad governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very much so what it's all about, bad governance.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Look, the thing about this report, I mean, people expect it to be an expose of criminal actions, but this commission was largely an investigation into governance at the PIC. It wasn't a forensic investigation. It didn't really chase the money. So its dealing with transactions was non-exhaustive. And where it did deal with specific transactions in some detail, it didn't make an effort to really go past, okay, these beneficiaries did this wrong. It was awarded in this way, which was incorrect, but it doesn't then go further to say, well, where'd the money go? So, I mean, that's not, that wasn't in the mandate. So that's not a failure. It's just there was a limit to the mandate of this commission.
Yeah. At one point, the report was actually, it was leaked. What do you suspect happened there?
Well, that depends on where we believe it was leaked. The claim that it was leaked came, I think, from the independent media group. And they reported on the supposedly leaked version, which their reportage was completely wrong. Hence, if it was a leak to them, they didn't read it or they completely misunderstood it. What they reported is the complete opposite of what the report says. So maybe someone was playing a trick on them.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, talking to some of the individuals, but I suppose the one that really has come out as really the influencer here was former Public Investment Corporation CEO Dan Matjila. Now, let's talk to him. He seemingly had the power and the support of the board. How much influence did he really have?
Oh, he was a bit of a dictator. He could really do things by himself. He signed at least 2 multi-billion rand deals without telling anyone, without it having gone through the requisite commission or committees that have to approve things. He could do things by himself, and that, again, it's not just his character. I mean, clearly the man did things his own way, but the way the PIC is set up did permit him to do it. And he was able to sign off on deals which really shouldn't it's not something a single man should be able to do.
Indeed, with that amount of money.
Yeah. So, when he has a strong personal relationship with someone who thrives on PIC funding, like Dr. Iqbal Survey, I mean, the possibility of conflict is already so severe that it's fairly obvious that there should be more oversight.
Yeah.
Even if what happened hadn't happened.
If we look at the role of the board in all of this, because this is, that's something that we need to see, is that, judging from what was said, the board is also implicated in this report, and it mentions non-performing duties. So, what role did they play in the demise of PIC?
Okay. So it's a mixed bag, right? So the board was primarily just ineffectual. They had no idea what was going on half the time. Some specific members are found to have, be probably guilty of malfeasance. That includes Dan Machila, it includes the Chief Financial Officer, Matsepe More, and it includes specifically one non-executive director who's Siposisiwe Zulu. The rest are not implicated specifically in any major transgression. It's just that the board, as a body, just didn't have oversight. It didn't, keep Machila in check. It didn't really have an eye on the ball. It had no idea what was going on among senior employees who felt that they were victimized. There was this culture of real fear and victimization in the upper echelons of this organization, to which the board seemed oblivious. So they were enablers.
Yeah, of all of this. I mean, some of the things that were said in this report are scathing of Dan Machila. I mean, it says, under Machila, PIC made repeated investments with a small number of entities which presented a repeat opportunity for the enrichment of single individuals. It also found exorbitant fees were paid to advisors without invoices or detailed invoices as what these costs were. It resulted in considerable losses. And, the overall riding factor, and also, which was quite interesting as well, is going into soliciting donations from COSATU and the ANC as well. Do you want to talk to that?
Okay, so half the report is about Dan Machila.
Yeah.
Like it's basically a takedown on the man, and his tenure there it's amazing, what he did. Like I said, he ran it like a dictator and did things that are inexcusable. So they call it an abuse of office, and that's putting it mildly. So he pressured investee companies that had already been funded to make donations to the ANC and COSATU, which, it's clear leverage. I mean, there's no way they could say no to the man who had funded their entire business. But there's the issue of enriching individuals. That's also kind of a structural problem. It shouldn't be permissible for the PIC to do a $10 billion deal that makes one man rich.
Yeah.
That's what they did with Jay Naidu, to buy shares in Steinhoff. It's a ludicrous idea. On paper, he was supposed to create a broadcast consortium of some sort. He never did. It wasn't followed up. There was no sanction for not doing it. It's one guy who got shares worth 10 billion rand. It's not the kind of thing you should be investing in, because you have a developmental mandate, The repeated deals that were done with Iqbal Survey are case in point. The first one, independent media, he couldn't pay it back, and yet then Machila was going to sign off on relieving that debt, giving him yet more money, and then giving him yet more money. So it's debt relief and then a couple of billion on top of it for a friend, a personal acquaintance who has not performed in his funding from the PIC.
Yeah.
So it's even if it wasn't his friend, it's still bad governance to give a single person that much money, especially if they have done badly and not repaid the money you initially gave them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, and at the end of the day, you still want to see somebody held responsible. We get this commission, we have these findings, and as you say, 50% of this, we'll try and get into a bit more of the report, but 15% of it is towards Dan Machila and the findings that went in there. And what the commissioner said is that they want the PIC to hold Machila financially responsible for these losses.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to see that money?
Look, I mean, it depends which losses you mean. We're talking overall suspect investments of 41 billion. They're not going to try and get that from him. It's very specific amounts that were lost in specific ways. So the primary mechanisms through which money was lost that may be reclaimed was the kind of things where they had all these transaction advisors who were appointed and basically did nothing but got, multi-million rand fees, that kind of thing. And the money that Dan Machila pressurized investees to donate to individuals, donate to ANC, to Kutsatu, and so on. So it's not like they're going after him for everything that was lost. I mean, it would be futile anyway. No one in the country would have that kind of money. What the report does, I mean, you mentioned the NPA at the beginning. It actually refers almost no one to the NPA.
Really?
Yeah, the only concrete referral to the NPA it makes is for Paul Magula and Ernest Nasane, who are the VBS representatives, and I'm fairly certain the NPA is already looking at them. What it does is it calls for a number of new investigations. So it calls for, I didn't count, but there's a number of forensic investigations it says must now be done. It calls for a forensic investigation into all investments with Big Boss Survey Sekonjalo Group, for instance. It calls for investigation into Mazulu of the board's lifestyle audit, which picked up a few funny things. She's actually the only board member whose lifestyle audit raised any red flags, not Dan Machila. In fact, they didn't make any concrete findings of self-enrichment. The funny thing is that the enrichment was all for external parties, which begs the question, what happened to the money afterwards? Did any of it circuitously come back? And again, Masulu's the only one where that seems to have been the case, that she organized for a personal friend and then a romantic partner to get work, capital from the PIC. That person then paid a stipend of 100,000 rand per month, and she mysteriously, with cash, bought a 7 million rand property. So that's the one. I don't say she did anything wrong, but that's the one that's getting flagged and they say should be investigated. And like many of these investigations would be civil. It would be about contracts that don't make sense, that there was non-performance or they're illegitimate to begin with because the process wasn't followed. So, but in terms of actual criminal prosecution, that there won't be very much of that.
And that, at the end of the day, is the problem here, because we've sat waiting for, as you say, the commission was going on for the better part of a year. We've waited for this report to come out. It's 1,000 pages of malfeasance and corruption and money that's gone missing. We were talking, what was the final amount that we guessing? It was around 41 billion. 41 billion. And nobody is being held account to this.
Well, the thing is, most of the people responsible for it are already gone. Dan Machila was made to resign. The entire board resigned early 2019. Most of the executives and managers involved in the deals have been disciplined and suspended and or just resigned. So most of the characters are no longer there. It's about chasing them where appropriate for recovering any monies they might owe that were lost in terms of their specific malfeasance. But you got to remember the point of this commission was not a forensic investigation.
Indeed,
it was not
as
punishment. It's not finding criminal conduct. It was to reform the PIC. So most of the recommendations it's not about chasing money or chasing people. It's about reforming the thing. It's about changing the PIC Act, changing political influence there. Like the Deputy Minister of Finance traditionally is the chair. That will no longer be the case if the Commission's report's adopted. They want to split it up into 5 units. All sorts of things. It's all organizational and quite boring for journalists, but it's a reform agenda that's actually quite fundamental to the organization.
Yeah. Let's also look at, we've spoken quite a bit of Dan Machila, but there are other issues and other things that are brought up as well. Steinhoff being one of them. And the PIC reporting basically that Jayendra Naidu's Lancaster Group, that's the partner, BE's partner, owes the PIC 11.6 billion rand and hasn't serviced this loan since, I think, February 2019.
Oh, I don't see how we would. But that deal was remarkably nonsensical. That's the one where they gave him 10 billion to buy shares in Steinhoff with the understanding that he would get some kind of special board access and be the PIC's man. At Steinhoff, that didn't happen. He didn't introduce a broad-based element. So nothing about that deal panned out the way it should have. And then Steinhoff collapsed, so now their shares are essentially worthless. Whatever base Sinaide would have had to repay is gone. I think understandably so. His investment has disappeared and his debt to the PIC remains, and accrues interest, hence 10 billion becomes 11 billion and so on. The prospect of repayment is minimal. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I think there's no finding that the PIC broke any real rules. It was just considered incredibly silly and unethical to give one man that much money for no real reason.
Yeah. In terms of another issue to come out of that, former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene and his son, do you think the former minister abused his power to a certain degree as well?
Well, the Commission report doesn't say so. It considers the fact that he is the minister's son. It says there's no obvious problem with that. At the time, there was no policy at the PIC prohibiting that a politically exposed person like him would get funding. And the Commission, in fact, made no finding that there was any undue pressure or anything like that. That specific transaction, that was for the palm oil refinery in Mozambique, is mostly criticized for being a really bad investment with no due diligence, bad risk assessment, and so on. But, we were also expecting to find some kind of discussion of Minister Nene's son, but actually, no. They don't seem to have found much of a problem with it.
Okay. Just finally, there is so much to so many different avenues and companies involved. This is a spider web, if there ever was, of corruption and malfeasance and different companies and avenues and individuals that have been pointed and spoken to in this. But you've already spoken to the NPA and them now taking this over. But I just want to end it on this note. These recommendations that have been made, what is going to come of them? We're going to talk to going, criminal NPA that not necessarily, do they have enough to go on right now and to do anything?
Well, I think that, there's now the second layer of processes, which is investigation stemming from the findings of the Commission, which is frustrating because this Commission took an immense amount of time to do its investigation, make its findings. And on the really, really suspicious parts of everything, they just recommend more investigation. Because, that wasn't their brief. To be fair, they were not, the prosecutorial process. Insofar as they did treat with suspicious transactions, I think they did fairly well. As they themselves say, it's non-exhaustive. It wasn't their job, but there's stuff in there I don't know. In some instances. It's good reading.
It is good reading, and I leave you to go and read even further and look into it. But, the reality is that this money is gone and there's orders for more investigations, more people to fall. But the thing is that we're still waiting with bated breath, and 44 billion rand is gone. And that's the long and short of it all. Dewald van Rensburg, thanks for coming in and just giving us a little bit more of an understanding of this report that's come out. The PIC Commission of Inquiry report was released yesterday, and a 1,000-page report. It's on the government website. If you'd like to go and read it, please do go and have a look and see what's going on. Dewald is a journalist with AmaBhungane Centre for Investigative Journalism, and he's been following this PIC story for a very long